Welcome to Leaders Gotta Lead. Join our leaders and hosts, Dan Gomer and Scott Harshman, as they bring you powerful strategies and insights to help you lead with purpose, impact, and unstoppable success.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Leaders Gotta Lead podcast. Today we are here with Roberta Mancuso, and we were already talking before this podcast began, and I am really excited for this one. Roberta and I know each other from a few years ago. We worked together in a real estate transaction. We just got to know each other and just developed a lot of respect for you and what you do. She's a doctor of social psychology. And before we started recording this, we were talking a little bit about that. And so we may go a little bit down that path today on this interview, because to me, that's I was a middle school science teacher, and I had a social experiment going on for 7 years, just monitoring the kids and watching their parents and how they interact. So this stuff is like fascinating to me. So we'll definitely go down that path a little bit. So, Roberta, before I do your introduction, just want to say welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So just a quick intro on Roberta. So as I said, she is a doctor of social psychology. But in addition to that, she's also an executive coach, a psychology professor, a researcher with extensive experience coaching top executives at companies like Meta, Amazon, Google, Workday, Accenture, Boeing, Sony, and Salesforce. So like some big companies. She specializes in building leadership skills and increasing leadership effectiveness, particularly for, sorry, I'm trying to not mess up my words, particularly for clients who are preparing for C-suite roles, so executives and things like that. So Roberta, thanks again for coming on here and talking about that. I mean, that's just a snapshot of everything that you do, but I think that it really exemplifies why we wanted to have you on this show. You're working with executives, you're working with leaders, and you are helping them become better at what they do. And so the whole purpose of this show is to not say we have the way, we just have a way. We're exploring ideas for how people can be better leaders in their own life, because at the end of the day, we believe everybody leads. And so we just want to make everybody better at doing that in whatever facet that they're looking at. So thanks again for being on here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. First question. We always ask everybody, what does it mean to be a good leader or a healthy leader to you?
To me,
to you,
a
what is
healthy
that?
leader, a good leader, an effective leader is really a transformational leader. So, there are all types of leaders. You can look at all kinds of research and management to see that there are different roles that leaders take in an organization. But to me, what really stands out is someone who not only moves forward the vision of the organization, but also helps individuals on their team to reach the next level. So they provide mentoring opportunities, they provide training opportunities, they listen to what people have to say about where they want to go in their careers and in their personal and professional goals. So to me, that's really, I mean, it's a pretty short answer, but that really gets to the heart of what I believe is a good leader, someone who really helps people to transform.
What do you think led you to that? Right? Because as you said, there's a bunch of different ways that we can lead, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think led you to that belief that this is the most effective way to do that?
Well, gosh, it started a long time ago. For the vast majority of my life, have actually been a Girl Scout. And within the Girl Scout organization, it's very much about teaching how to lead and honing leadership skills. And what I realized was that it's all fine and good to have a list of tasks and get them done. And that happens in any type of organization, right? But that doesn't leave you with much, right? You get the task done and that's it. But what I found is that, through connections with other people, through building those relationships and understanding where people are going in their own lives, you can really have a huge impact on someone, much more than if you're just doing a task and getting it done. So I think, from second grade, I've been looking at this in various ways and understanding that those connections between people are really what matter for people's success.
Love that.
So in your line of work, you train a lot of leaders, executives, you help them get to the next level.
Mhm.
When you're looking at, those people that are, I'm going to say, given that opportunity to become a leader, um, what do you see as a common characteristics between them, and where do you like start dissecting and saying, hey, this is the first thing that we need to work on
Mhm.
before we can move on? Is it the vision? Is it, some of the other things that you said? Like, how do you decipher all of that?
Good question. So I think that what strikes me the most about preparing people to move to that next level is how unprepared they are, essentially. Um, there's something that psychologists call rising to your optimal level of incompetence. And it's also called the Peter Principle in the management world. And it's basically the idea that you start out in a company or in a role with a certain set of skills, and as you're promoted upward, different skills are needed, and you may not have them. And so what people find is they start getting promoted and they're like, oh, this is nothing like how I started in this company. I need to build these things. And so I think that what's really important is first taking a look at their overarching set of values and trying to get a sense of, if they had to craft a mission statement for themselves about the kind of person they want to be, both personally and professionally, what would that look like? And so we spend a lot of time initially figuring out what people value and how those values can translate into their strengths and then into leadership. So that's kind of where I start.
And
So what? Oh, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say one of the things that we talk about on here a lot, and I truly believe in, is in order to be a good leader, you have to be able to lead yourself.
Mhm.
And if you can't lead yourself, you're not going to be able to lead others, and you're not going to be able to get others to like buy into your vision and everything else. So, what are some of the things that you really focus on the personal side to where they're really saying like, hey, these are the steps that you need to take so that you're leading yourself to become the best leader of people?
Mhm. I think that, again, starting with their values, starting with the things that really drive someone, that's the first step. But then the next step is about figuring out what their impact is in their environment, right? So if you're thinking about the workplace, a 360 is a really good way to kind of assess, okay, how do people see you? How do they see your success? How do they see your weak points? And that helps you to sort of come up with a composite sketch of who you are and how you can really motivate other people as a leader. So that's a lot of the technique that I use at the beginning.
So with that, this kind of leads me into my next question. Do you find that most leaders have a hard time doing that, right? Because I mean, as a psychologist and those kinds of things, right? I'm sure you understand how hard it is for a lot of people to look at themselves honestly. It's
Hmm.
really easy to put, we all do it, right? We put up the walls and the facades and whatever. And sometimes it's hard to go inward and look at how other people see us. Do you find that people struggle with that? Or are the people or do you find that they're like ready to lean in most of the time?
I would say it's a combination. I mean, I think I've never met anyone who was completely comfortable with that process because, we like to believe that we're a certain way. And deep down, oftentimes we know what our faults are, but we don't really want anyone else to be aware of those, right? So,
Even though
but
they are.
they are. And so yeah, I've never seen someone who was like, "Let's do this," and then they get their feedback and they're like, "This is awesome." No,
Yeah.
it's a hard process because it takes a lot of honesty with yourself to sort of take that in. And I think also we as human beings, just looking at the neuroscience of it, we focus on the negative, right? So when you're looking at feedback from a 360, for instance, oftentimes you focus on the nitpicky negative stuff, right? Or just the negative stuff in general, because I mean, evolutionarily, you could argue that that's what's been adaptive, right? To look for the things that are kind of leading you to understand where your danger points are. And so, yeah, so people focus on the negative, and what they need to do is really take a step back and look kind of holistically at what's going on, what's the positive, what's the negative. It's never all negative, so
Yeah.
that part is good. But yeah, so I think that moving them through that and helping them understand kind of a realistic picture and acknowledging what they already know are their weaknesses, because we all know, yeah, for the most part. Very few people don't think that they have any. Yeah.
Right. Right.
How
So
dare you say that I have a weakness?
I know, right? It's
right.
hard though.
He's a
Yeah.
raging narcissist. No, but
We can talk about narcissism.
so, I think you bring up two really interesting points. When we step into the role as a leader, we're forced to take, it's hard. It's hard. It's not all sunshine and rainbows and all this kind of stuff. If we want to be a good leader, what I heard you saying is that we have to take stock of ourselves, and nobody wants to do it, which means it's hard, and it's normal that it's hard. That's part of the process. But then the other thing that I heard you say is that it's hard for us to see it ourselves. And when we get feedback, we might look at it and nitpick, but we need someone else a lot of times to actually work with us and help us, which is where, you would come in, right? To say, hold on a second, let's look at this holistically, because as an individual, sometimes that can be hard. And so, my takeaways from what you just said were, leadership is hard. It's not an easy transition, and you've got to be willing to do the hard work to make yourself better, to lead yourself. But then you also need help from other people, so that you're not getting, stuck. And this kind of leads me to my other question is, what do you find that when leaders come to you, what do you find is maybe the hardest thing for those leaders to do on the front end? Does that make sense? Or what is the
Yeah.
biggest challenge that they seem to face when they first come to you?
Mm-hmm. I think there are two main categories that I see. Um, I do a lot of work with people in tech, right? And so oftentimes you see people who've started out as, for instance, coders. They're working at computers doing things, and suddenly they find themselves being promoted. They have a tendency to be really focused on the smaller details, because if you're a coder, you have to, right? You have to figure out each little thing that has to work right. But when they start stepping into leadership roles, what I find is that you have a hard time looking at the bigger picture. So how do you go from a detail focused approach to a big picture theoretical, the sky's the limit kind of thing? And that's, speaking of sky, that's another piece that's similar. If you're an individual contributor or someone who doesn't have a closer to executive leadership role, you're kind of working on the ground level, in the weeds, maybe 1,000 feet up. But when you get into the leadership realm, you're looking at 30,000 feet up, right? You're looking at strategic planning. You're looking at how employees align with each other. And that's a very different perspective. So getting them to move from the weeds to that 30,000 level, I think that's the really important piece.
That's really interesting. That vision piece that we talk a lot about on here as well. Yeah.
There's a book that came to my mind. There's two that actually came to my mind as you were talking. The first one is Surrounded by Idiots. I don't know if you've ever read that book. It's basically off the DISC profile, and how different people act in different situations. But the other book that really came to my mind was Traction. Have you ever heard of that book? Have you ever read that?
That one I have not heard of.
So it talks through different layers of companies and things like that. And what I heard you saying is having a vision, being a visionary, and then also taking them to where they're not necessarily the ones implementing. So having a visionary and then having an implementer is really the way that it breaks down. So when you're talking through this, and as a leader, I know that some leaders, I will say that this is my fault very often. I have big vision, right? I have some really good ideas. I have some great ideas, but I can't get everyone to buy into them for one reason or another. And the other problem is having somebody that's dedicated as far as the implementer to really come back to me and say, hey, that's a great idea, but we need to like take a step back and go here.
Hmm.
So the question that I'm looking for is, as a leader, when you're that way of having these big visions and everything else, what does it look like to have the people surrounded by you to really kind of not necessarily put you in your place, but kind of like put you in your place? I mean, that's the
Hmm.
best way I can put
Yep.
it. Like just put you in your place.
Like
Yeah.
how to work with
Control
those
How to
people, or how to
get to
get those
that.
people to come with you.
Yeah, or no, just kind of control their vision, control their ideas to where it's like, hey, rein it in a little bit. Like
Oh, yeah, yeah,
let's
yeah.
use the rifle approach versus the shotgun approach.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that that's the second piece that's probably the most difficult about training leaders to be leaders. And that's they have to figure out how to delegate and what to delegate to other people, right? Because it's great if you can start with a vision, but it is a very different type of person who can have a great vision versus a person who can really implement the details of that vision. I mean, sometimes it's the same person, but more often than not, you need a team of people who are championing the vision with you. So, yeah, so I think that when it comes to building leaders, teaching them how to delegate, there's so many different types of delegation that you can train people to do. Understanding that you can't be the only one to move that vision forward. But then, what happens is you have to figure out if the people on your team have the skills that you need to complement you, right? And that can be really hard if you're a very vision focused person. But it's about understanding and appreciating the strengths of the different people on your team. So I'm thinking about a client that I've coached for several years now. Um, they started out as an individual contributor, and now they're a senior director, um, looking at VP positions. And they have these people on their team that are so quick, right? They just like they move through information so fast, and they're really good at implementing these different objectives that my client has. He's not as good about doing that, right? So he's better at the smaller details, and he's learning how to look at the bigger picture. But he has people who are really good at pushing forward those objectives, and that's the kind of combination of people that you need, right? So it's all about who you surround yourself with and whether or not you can help find people that will break apart that vision into manageable steps or manageable chunks.
It's interesting you say that because Surrounded by Idiots, I know the title of the book is it's kind of funny.
Obnoxious. Yeah.
But it does talk through that of what you just said is
Mm.
like understanding that there's different personality profiles that can really help you and being surrounded by all different profiles and how to communicate with them and how to talk through it with them and then also understanding what they're really good at versus what you're not good at. So it's really interesting that you said that. That's what I took from that book as well, but you just hit me square in the face again. So thank you for that.
Sure. Yeah.
So just to switch gears a little bit here. So as we said, you're a social psychologist. So first, can you tell us a little bit about what that means? And then second, what is it about that, not just the degree, but then you're also a professor, and so you teach these concepts, right? How has that um I guess, led you down the path towards leadership, towards working with executives and things like that? And how does it like kind of support what you're doing now?
Hmm. It's a pretty big question. Um,
That's what we do here.
yeah. So, in terms of the way I think about social psychology, it's all about how the individual interacts with the group, the social environment that they're around. And there are so many different variables that influence how an individual interacts in a given situation. And oftentimes we discount the power of the situation when we're thinking about how people's behavior kind of manifests. So social psych is all about that kind of process. Like what is it that caused someone to react the way they did? It's probably not their personality, although their personality has something to do with it. It's actually components in the situation that are causing pressure to respond in a certain way. So I've always been fascinated by that. And
Yeah.
I think as I went forward in my studies, I realized, okay, you have to look at both the person and the situation to really understand what's going on. And so my work as a doctoral student and beyond that has always been an intersection of looking at the demands of the situation and the demands of the person. So what sorts of personality traits interact with the environment to create whatever situation, whatever behavior the person engages in. So a natural offshoot of social psychology is industrial and organizational psychology, and that's looking at essentially psychological concepts within the workplace. So what is it about the person? So whether it's physical attributes or psychological attributes that help to create a certain culture in an organization. So for instance, um, it turns out that people who are introverted, there's a higher percentage of them in fields such as IT. And in other types of industries, it's a different type of personality that's kind of oversampled. And so what you have to do is then figure out, well, if I'm working with a bunch of IT folks or a bunch of engineering folks, how do I get them to communicate effectively, knowing that they don't feel as comfortable talking with each other, right? So I've
Right.
always been fascinated by those different things. And, as I think about it, this fascination probably started earlier when I was in college and I was doing a lot of temp work in these big organizations. So these big engineering organizations, and I think I worked at Taco Bell, the corporate offices of Taco Bell for a while. And I was fascinated by the interactions that I saw happening and the hierarchy, right? So in the corporate world, even still, the vast majority of leaders are men, and the vast majority of people under them, the administrative staff, are women. That used to drive me crazy, right? But it made me realize, okay, there are social and cultural factors happening here that are impacting the workplace in very basic ways. Um, and that also motivated me to not stop there, right? To get a doctorate, to do things that a lot of women still don't get to do, right? So
Yeah.
let's see. What do I want to add to that? That was, I just threw a lot at you. So
No,
give me
no,
a follow up.
I think that's great. I think I can start to already paint a picture of how this lends itself into leadership. So I'd love to get your take on that. But as I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking about, my own team and creating that culture and stuff like that, and kind of almost like context, with my team. So it's not
Hmm.
just about um yeah, it's almost about understanding the psychology of the whole situation. And if you can understand how to create an environment and also have the right people that like mesh with that environment, that's when you kind of have like the recipe for success. Is that kind of what I'm
Hmm.
hearing?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And so,
Hey guys, Dan Gomer here with the Leaders Gotta Lead podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully you are enjoying the content, and if you are, I've got great news because there's more where that came from. Just click on the link in the show notes to discover new ways to plug into what we're doing, to find new content that we're putting out, and to discover how we might be able to work together to elevate your leadership game. Just click on the link in the show notes and let's take our leadership success to the next level.
kind of narrowing the focus back into leadership, I would say that, you know, being able to understand the biggest factors that influence an organizational culture, both personal and group factors, that's really going to help you allow your team to succeed because you're going to take into consideration all of those factors as you figure out what works for them. So yeah, so being a leader that can do that, I think that you're moving in the direction of transformational when you can really see all of those forces. What's interesting is that there's this whole area of literature looking at psychopathy and leadership. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
No.
back in the early 2000s, some researchers started wondering if the characteristics that make people want to be CEOs and kind of lead their own companies and things like that or be really successful in business, they started wondering if some of the traits that they possessed were similar to psychopaths. And so they started doing these studies.
I don't like where this is going.
It's not so bad.
You're a psychopath, Dan.
Right, right.
Would be the first
So,
I got called that.
oh gosh. So what they did was they compared people in business with people like incarcerated individuals, people in prisons and things like that. And what they found was that their scores on psychopathy, and there are, psychopathy assessments you can do that are pretty standardized. Their scores were the same level or higher as people who were incarcerated or, in prisons and things like that. So there was this commonality.
What's the correlation?
That does make sense on what you're saying, though, because I'm thinking of like El Chapo and like all these drug lords, right? Like
they're good, right?
They're leaders. Hitler, like
they are leaders.
Yeah. What's the correlation between like the regular guy though, right? El Chapo's, minions or whatever, right? Like like on a broader scale, what's the connection?
What's the connection between normal...
leadership? Yeah, leadership and the people that are in jail. Is it just
I can tell you.
They're all drivers, but they just kind of...
Let's hear it. She has an answer. Let's go.
I have an answer. Yeah, I was just looking at this yesterday. So, like I said, the research started kind of in the early 2000s, but there was a study that was published in 2023 where they actually said, okay, what are the different components of this psychopathic personality that we're tapping into when it comes to CEOs, when it comes to people in the business world? And what they found was pretty interesting. And so I've just got a list that I wrote down. So fearless dominance is one of them. Social influence. So these are things that they excel in. Fearlessness, stress immunity. That's an interesting one, right? And then some other ones are self-centered impulsivity, Machiavellian egocentricity, blame externalization, rebellious nonconformity, and carefree non-planfulness. That one I thought was really interesting. Now, I just threw a lot of jargon at you. So,
carefree non-playfulness, is that what it was?
Non-planfulness. So they kind of get to a point where they're like, we're just going to do this, right? So it links to impulsivity. Those are some of the traits.
I could definitely relate to a number of those.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm listening to you go through it. I'm like, yes, 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 yes. And I'm like, I'm not incarcerated, okay?
No.
But you are a little psycho.
I mean, I guess
but listen, I think, kind of in the more general term of like, you're psycho, right? Like that kind of term. I think you do have to be a little crazy to start a big company, or crazy in terms of like, it's abnormal to be like, I'm going to take on all of this risk. Mm-hmm. I'm going to it's not easy. It's a constant onslaught of just problems and issues and whatever. I could go get a job at McDonald's and be way less stressed out, but I have this drive to just like make my life difficult. You have to be a little off to enjoy that, right?
And I mean, psychopathy, the way that you think about the term is pretty negative, obviously. It really just has to do with where your emphasis is, right? So are you emphasizing keeping everybody happy and smoothing all the rough edges and things like that? Or are you out there taking risks and, moving your vision forward, right? So it's not all bad. There are plenty of psychopaths out there that are fully functional, not incarcerated, but yeah, it is about taking those risks and wanting to influence the world and your social environment. And I think that's really, what it's tapping into.
Yeah. Scott looked stunned.
I'm just thinking my way through this.
Yeah.
I mean, with what you're saying, it does make sense because I forget this saying, and I'm going to butcher it, so I know I am, but just bear with me. But don't they say like the richest place in the world is like cemeteries? Isn't it something like that? Because
I don't know.
They've never seen they never took action for the opportunities, right? Like they never kind of lowered down the fear of maybe writing that book or starting that business or whatever it may be. So like hearing you talk about this, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, like I wouldn't necessarily be where I'm at as far as my company if it wasn't for somebody who kind of, I guess, was a little crazy and decided to start this and
Mhm.
then had the vision and just continued to grow it. So I don't know. I'm trying to gather my thoughts right now based off of what you just
Yeah.
said with incarceration and everything.
I mean, it's really good, right? It's
Yeah.
super interesting. That's why I love talking about this stuff and why I'm glad you came
Yeah.
on this show. I do have another question for you while Scott composes himself. Um, so, as he realizes that he's a psychopath, this is great. Um,
I always knew I
anyway,
was a little crazy. Not
so
straight jacket crazy, but you
that's
know.
right. Right.
No, you got to be,
Um,
right?
That's right. So I'm kind of curious, you've shared a little bit about your story about how, you worked in the Taco Bell corporate offices and you kind of saw this hierarchy and it agitated you to a certain extent. Um, and so that kind of, it sounds like started to lead you down a certain path. But why did you choose to do what you do now? Like what was your driving force to get you to the position where you're like, you know what, now I want to work with these executives and these leaders and help them develop their skills. What's your driving force behind that?
Yeah. Two things. Um, the first thing is, what I talked about previously, which is this desire to understand people. I just by default, I'm fascinated by people. And, you know, whenever I tell someone I'm a psychologist, the first thing they say is, "Oh, so you're analyzing me." No, I'm already done analyzing you. Like it already happened.
Yeah.
You're behind the curve here. But that's the first part. But the second part was actually quite a bit different. So where I work, um, they were one of the first universities to really start going down the path of online education, online classes, and things like that. And for a while, I was doing a lot of that. And as a as a person who's spent a lot of time in academia, I was trained to teach in the classroom and to have those one-to-one interactions and those group-to-one interactions with people. And as I moved more into the online space, I realized that I really missed that. I missed that ability to feel like I was deeply impacting somebody because of the type of online classes we were doing, you didn't really have much face to face. It was all, the curriculum's there. We're going to spend a lot of time emailing and texting and whatever, but not a lot of face to face. And so that I would say is one of the things that really pushed me in the direction of working with executives, working with individuals, because I could have an hour or a half hour or 45 minutes or whatever, where it was just the two of us figuring out where that person was at and how they wanted to become a better leader. So that to me was a way to kind of balance out what I was doing to use the knowledge that I've gained and apply it to different situations, but then to have that one-to-one impact. And for me, coaching is about transformation, just like I believe leadership is. And so getting people to reach insights just through asking them questions, getting them to think about where they want to go, think about what they need to work on. That's incredibly fulfilling for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So,
Um,
Scott, if you have another
I
question, go for
gotta.
it. I've got
You
one.
talked about Taco Bell, so I gotta ask this question. I heard you say something. Well, I heard you say something about like the hierarchy, and it
Yeah.
like males are like more predominantly like on the leadership roles, and then females are more on the admin roles.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like there's some great female leaders out there. Like
Yes, it's
some
much
of
better than it was.
yes, and I'm sure that's changed over the years. But
Hmm.
what do you think? Why does that happen? Like, why do you see that males typically are the ones that lead more than the females? And what do you talk through with females to help them become, that next
Hmm.
leader?
Hmm. Oh, this is a big rabbit hole you're going down. You know, I've spent a lot of time teaching personality theory, and there's a theory um, by a woman named Nancy Chodorow, and it talks about how from the very beginning, from when you're first born, um, there are ways that you are shaped based on your gender. And if you look at that theory, kind of the overarching idea is that the belief behind it is that males are taught to be independent and to separate themselves from their mom. And females are taught to be more in relation. And so they're constantly looking at the other person and figuring out how they fit together. And I think that rings true a lot of the time for women. I mean, if you think about the way that society has pushed women into certain roles versus men into certain roles, like men are supposed to be very individualistic and, I'm going to achieve and I'm whatever it is. And then women, oftentimes, not always, and it's certainly changing, but traditionally they've been in the position to be the caregiver, right? To take care of the kids predominantly, to take care of the parents when they reach that stage. And you have to be this self in relation to be effective at that. And when you look at the different roles that occur in an organization, you see a parallel, right? So people who are dealing with, office manager, administrative assistant, things like that, they have to constantly be looking at the interrelations between people, figuring out what their needs are and how to meet them. Once you get to a leadership position, you do that, but in a different way. You're still foremost looking at how you progress through your career and how you achieve your goals. And yeah, you have to collaborate with people, but there's still this very individualistic mindset. That made me think of something else, though. When you look at status and power in society, traditionally, we've had this patriarchal society, right? So men have always been in charge and been the ones that kind of led things. And that goes back, hundreds, thousands of years. But when it comes to the way that emotions are used with power and status, you see this really clear distinction. You see that people of higher status express certain emotions and people of lower status express certain emotions. And it just happens to be that if you were to look at the stereotypically gendered emotions, they would come out as male versus female. So what I mean by that is men are more socially acceptable when they experience or when they express anger and pride. Women, what you expect from them is not anger and pride. It's it's compassion. It's those types of caregiving types of emotions. And if you look at the political climate, right? So if you look at the female politicians versus the male politicians, I mean, I don't have to tell you people's perceptions of female politicians versus males for the same behaviors, right? If you're aggressive as a female, there's a certain thing that you're called. If you're aggressive as a male, you're not called that. It's actually a good thing. So there are lots of ways how society has kind of put us into little boxes, and it has to do with gender roles and socialization and all kinds of things that I could talk about forever. But yeah, I'll stop.
So so when you have a woman who's stepping into a leadership role and you're working with her, is this where you spend a lot of time with them? I guess kind of what I'm getting at is if you're working with a woman, is it important that they understand these roles at a deeper level in order to help them navigate more effectively?
Yes, absolutely. They need to be comfortable with the fact that people are going to have negative perceptions about them because they're acting stereotypically male if they're a strong leader.
Yeah.
99% of the time.
Yeah. So
Another interesting, yeah.
I'm dealing with that with my 13-year-old daughter.
Oh, good luck with that. Yeah, I've been there. Another piece, though, is that in terms of the effort that it takes for women in a leadership role, it's very similar between women and minorities, actually. They have to be even better than a male in an equivalent role to be respected. They have to perform at a higher level to compensate for their gender, for their ethnicity.
Yeah, because of the social norms that can affect it. Yeah.
Yep.
That's really interesting, and I'm sure we could spend a whole time on this. I want to shift gears just a little bit if we could. I mean, lots of great insight there, and it's, I was like locked in the whole time. I'm like, this is like super interesting and such a great resource, by the way, for leaders, male, female, that you are, to help them navigate through this, because it is a very complicated and nuanced thing. And I think bringing in this aspect of the social psychology into it is brilliant. So I do have a question. When some of these leaders come to you, kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. So I think we had asked, what's their biggest challenge? What attributes do the people who come to you, who you were like, this one's going to kill it, like this person's going to be really, really good. What are those attributes that you might pick up on that would tell you that they're going to be really good at leadership?
I would say one of the first ones that I pick up on is that they can tolerate ambiguity. So they're given a task. They're not told how to do it, right? They need to figure out, what is this person trying to say, and how can I get to the point where they feel like I've done what they've asked me to do? So yeah, a tolerance for ambiguity, but also the ability to prioritize tasks. So any leader, and especially with a lot of the companies that I've worked with, which are, started out as startup companies, right? They're drinking from a fire hose all the time. And that's common in a lot of companies. But the problem is, what do you do with that? You figure out which tasks you need to do first. You figure out what the list looks like, and what needs to be done now, what needs to be done later, what really doesn't matter that much. And the third piece that I would say, and I don't know, maybe this should have been the first, is progress rather than perfection.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they
Now,
understand that they don't have to spend a ton of time on something for it to be good enough and to move on to the next thing.
paralysis by analysis, is that what it's called?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's three huge things. And I don't think anybody's really brought those first two up on the podcast yet. So you had mentioned being able to like organize tasks, being task oriented, and being comfortable with an ambiguous.
Ambiguity.
Yeah, like that's a really interesting concept. Being comfortable with uncomfortable almost.
Yeah. And I think that's where the fearless part comes in. If you look at those psychopathic traits again,
Yeah.
you don't have to get caught up in that, right? You just have to keep working toward what you think is going to make a difference. But sometimes you don't know exactly what that is.
Yeah, the organizing and figuring out tasks, I think that's like, I'm a big proponent of it. I love it. I use a strategy.
What do you use?
So I'll have all my tasks listed out, and
Uh-huh.
then I have to look at them, and I'll say what's gonna be the quickest to implement that will produce the biggest impact.
Mm.
I go through each one, I compare 1 to 2, whichever one's gonna get a better one, I give a star. 1 to 3, star. 1 to 4, star. 1 to 5, all the way through the entire list, and then I go to 2, 2 to 3, 2 to 4.
Interesting.
And whichever one has the most stars, that's what I focus on first.
Okay.
Because that one just visually is the easiest one. So, I mean, what other strategies have you seen work? Like,
Mm.
I call it
Yeah.
priority tasking, right? But like, what other strategies do you see that work that that you might teach or talk to a
Mm.
leader, an entrepreneur, and say, "Hey, try this strategy as well. Like, it might benefit you."
You know, typically there are sort of four categories. There's one that's, what's the easiest, what's the lowest hanging fruit, right? Um, what's the one that's most important in terms of the objectives of the organization? Um, and then another category is what's the one that you're really dreading that just needs to get done?
All the frog.
I know. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Um, and then the fourth category is, it can wait, basically. I mean, it's not going to achieve the biggest objectives. Yeah, it needs to get done. It's, kind of housekeeping, but it's not going to make that much of an impact. So, yeah, so prioritizing according to those types of things is pretty effective for people. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the frog, oh gosh. Sometimes it feels good just to get some of the low-hanging fruit out of the way before you deal with the frog. But yeah, I mean, it's always good to get that frog.
That's a good book.
It is a good book. Yeah, yeah.
I'm
So,
glad you got my reference on that
oh
because
yeah.
I say it a lot and people are like, what do you like? You're gonna eat a frog? I'm like, no, 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 it's a book.
Yeah, and it is really effective because I mean, I know I think about like when I was working on my dissertation, it's so daunting, right? And you get caught up in the sort of mind games and the anxiety and all of that about doing something really big because, oh my gosh, is it going to meet your expectations? Is it going to meet someone else's expectations? But just eating that frog right away, you don't go down that rabbit hole. So it's much better.
And that is that trait, right? Like I feel like, for me, having a team and I kind of go to the Nike thing. I'm like, just
Hmm.
do it. You know what you
Stop
need
thinking.
to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just just do it, right? Because I
Right.
just I just get up and okay, yeah, it sucks, but you know what? I'm gonna get it done and then I'll be done with it and I'll be happy that I got it done and I'll feel accomplished and whatever and just like eat the frog. And I feel like sometimes as a leader, that's and other leaders that I talk to, especially in real estate who have teams and things like that, real estate's not it's a pretty simple process in terms of like how you get business and all of those kinds of things, but it takes a lot of work. And I hear a lot of leaders who get frustrated because they're like, just talk to people,
Yeah.
just talk to
Take a
people, and they
step.
don't do it, and then they rip their hair out. Do you
Hmm.
have some advice for leaders who are in that kind of position where their people are not producing and they're just trying to figure out how to get them on board with the simple stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm. You know, after my doctorate, I did a lot of postdoctoral research. And one of the areas that I looked at was health psychology
Was
and
what?
health psychology.
Health psychology. Okay.
Yeah. And one of the big areas in health psychology is behavior change. How do you get people to change their habits? How do you get people to start something new? And I fall back on that a lot. And one of the findings in that area is that if you break a step down into really small pieces, people are much better at making progress. So, for instance, um, I would imagine that in a lot of organizations, networking is very important, right? Networking to get new clients, networking to, you know, increase the possibility of promotion, whatever it is. Um, if you're an introvert, networking is not easy. And oftentimes to get over that fear that happens when you even think remotely about networking, it's breaking it down. So, okay, how do I network? All right, I'm going to go to this regional meeting. And what am I going to do when I get there? I'm going to walk in and I'm going to introduce myself to three people. What am I going to say when I introduce myself? I'm going to ask them this question, or I'm going to tell them this piece of information about me. Breaking it down into tiny pieces. And what I'm thinking of is the original research was, one of the studies that I'm thinking of was trying to increase people's likelihood of getting preventative health screens. And what they did was they gave them a map that told them exactly how to get from point A to point B and who to talk to when they got there and so on. And so breaking it down, which sometimes, I mean, it's obnoxious, right?
Yeah.
For a leader to have to break it down to that level. But it turns out that it really helps people to feel like it's not such a daunting task.
That
Well,
is
I
such good
love
advice. Such
what
good advice.
I love how you broke it down too of like the networking event, right? Because some people, like in sales, they don't
Mm,
like to make phone calls. Well,
mm-mm.
breaking it down, like instead of saying, hey, you have to do 50 phone calls today, otherwise, like you're gonna fail. Like break it down into something that's like palatable, like maybe 10 phone calls, but more importantly, what do you say on those phone calls, right? Like have the questions that you're gonna ask or the information that
Opener.
you want to share or whatever it is, right? Like I love how you broke that down I mean, you simplified it so much. And I resonated really well with the networking events because I mean, I don't consider myself an introvert, but I hate going to them.
They're
So,
That's a
painful.
different reason though.
yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
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 I'm an introvert. How I ended up doing what I'm doing, who knows? But yeah, it's going to conferences. Ugh. I go to conferences where I know people, right? Where I already have friends, but I don't always. And so then what do I do? How do I do that? And one of the things that also similar to networking is how you act in meetings, right? So being an introvert and being a listener, I tend to listen in meetings. I don't talk as much in meetings because I also like to formulate my thoughts. Um, that's not good when you're just rapid fire in a meeting. So what I had to do when I started moving into more leadership, at the university was I had to say to myself, okay, you're going to this meeting. Here's what you're going to get out of it. Here's how you're going to do that. Like, these are the questions you're going to ask. This is the opinion you're going to share. Um, you need to talk at least twice, in whatever this half-hour meeting is. So yeah, I had to make it very concrete for myself. And what that does is it's naturally reinforcing.
Mhm.
And so then you're like, oh, well, the next time it's that much easier because you see that it's a positive experience, right? So yeah,
I
personal
mean,
experience.
well, that's another great point that you just made too, of like breaking it down as a leader perspective to, the people that you're trying to get to do the task at hand is what are you truly going to get out of it? And don't like, from what I heard you say, and maybe I just interpreted this, but like don't say like, hey, if you make 50 phone calls, you're going to get 50 clients. No, it's like break it down into something that's more realistic of like, if you do 50 phone calls, you might get 4 appointments. Like I don't think it should be that
Mhm.
bad.
Setting expectations.
Yeah, but like really break it down into more like feasible information of what you're going to get out of it as well. And let's not kid ourselves. When you go into those group meetings, you're analyzing everybody. I'm kidding.
But it's already happened. Like it happened in the first 10 seconds, so
Because
now
you
we
do it
move on to
naturally.
the rest,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay, before I've got one more quick question for you that's kind of a question that is kind of personal to me that I would like to get more information on. But before I do that, how can people get a hold of you, Roberta? What's the best way for them to contact you if they're whatever, they're an executive or they're, a student or whatever it is? What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Um, you know, I have a company called our Mancuso Consulting. So they can email me. That's the easiest. It's just rmancusoconsulting at Gmail.
Okay, awesome.
So
We'll put
yeah,
that in
that's the easiest way.
Yeah, great. We'll put it in the comments as well. But
Okay.
so my question here is, uh, you talked about you're an introvert and you go to these big events. There's a lot of people on my team who don't go to these events, and there's tremendous value in them. We host big events in Miami and Cabo, and it's not
Mhm.
just about vacation. You go there and you get all these amazing things. And so I try to like explain to my team, like, here's all the amazing benefits of going to this thing. It's worth your time. Put a plan in place to get there. And a lot of times it falls on deaf ears. I'm just kind of
Mm.
curious, do you have any advice on how to connect with introverts as a leader to help them see the value in getting out of their comfort zone, right? Because there's probably some introverts on our team who are like, I'm not going to go into that big group. It's just not worth it for me.
Yeah,
Do you have any feedback on that?
I do. I mean, one of the frustrating things about these big group meetings is that, not that I have anything against extroverts, but they're planned by people who are typically extroverts. And what I mean by that is extroverts love the stimulation of a big group. They love, they're partiers, right? So they like to um, be entertained.
Yeah.
And part of that is, they're deriving their energy from the people around them. Introverts are completely the opposite. And so what is good to do is figure out a way to mix up the events. So can you have a system, and it doesn't have to be a mentor system, but a system where people are put into pairs or much smaller groups, 2 to 4 people, where introverts can really focus on the interaction with someone rather than, the craziness of a big group. Um, but but the other piece of my answer really has to do with what the benefits are for that person going to an event like that. And sometimes you have to make that really explicit, you know.
Mm.
And it comes to understanding, okay, yes, it may be a big group and crazy and, you know, um, draining because, an introvert is going to come away from that feeling exhausted most of the time, where extroverts, totally the opposite, they'll be energized. And so, can they can they set goals like I'm going to have a 10-minute conversation with 3 different people.
Mhm.
But anything that really accentuates a smaller, quieter environment within that big meeting is going to be helpful.
That's really good.
I
Yeah.
mean, again, the way you break that down, I absolutely like, I love it because I mean, I'm just thinking through it, right? Like these big conferences, I've gone to tons of them,
Hmm.
professionally coached, all that. Um, and I love them. I get energized from them. Dan, I think you're the same way. But
Yep.
you say that to somebody else on your team, and they're going to absolutely, that's an introvert, they're going to absolutely hate it. So, and I think I heard this correctly. So if I didn't, tell me, but like really talk through the benefits of what they're going to achieve from it and also talk to what their potential anxiety might be of like, hey, I
Hmm.
understand you might think that this is just a big group the entire time, but there are these breakout sessions that will
Hmm.
just be more, one on one person teaching 40 people, that you're going to get a lot of tactics and insight from that will help you achieve X in your business.
Right.
Um, I think that
Yeah.
really explaining it and taking the time to explain it and taking the time to hear and see where they're coming from to break it down for them. I think
Right.
that's what I heard you say, which I
Yeah.
loved it.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, assuming that you've been in the industry a while, you probably know people who are going to be at these meetings, right? So can you orchestrate a lunch with one other person while this introvert is at this big conference?
Yeah.
How do you create that one-on-one interaction that is really rewarding to an introvert? That's a good place to start.
instead
Well,
of, and I'm just thinking, I got to ask this follow-up question, but instead of saying, hey, come to lunch with us, there's going to be 20 of us having lunch together.
I mean, that's better because you're inevitably going to be sitting next to someone, and so you might start a one-on-one conversation. It's the one-on-one conversation you got to focus on, right? So
Yeah.
however you get to that, I think works. Yeah.
well, and that's huge. As an extrovert, my wife just told me the other day that I was the biggest extrovert she knew. I don't know what she's talking about, but she, so for me, hearing this, and there's likely other leaders who are watching this who are extroverts, and saying, yes, I don't know how to connect with those introverts. this is gold. I'm over here taking down notes. I'm like,
Cool.
yeah. Okay, great. I'm totally going to use this with my team and dig down into why. What's giving you anxiety about going? I know, okay, yeah, it costs money. Everybody starts with that, but there's more to it than that. And diving down into that and finding those opportunities for those smaller groups, and trying to see it from their perspective. I haven't done that yet. As leaders, you said this earlier, to be a good leader, we got to basically step into somebody else's shoes and take that 360 view. How are they looking at us, right? Which means we also have to understand them. And I don't know that I've done a good job of kind of looking at it from their angle. And so, if there's any leaders watching this and you're a high D like I am, you're a driver, you're an extrovert, this is good stuff.
Good.
Yeah, Roberta, thank you so much for being on here. I know we're coming up on time here, so I really appreciate you being here. Before we wrap up, Scott, do you have any final words or anything?
I mean, the nuggets on the psychology piece, we're all psychopaths, but that's the psychology piece I thought was super insightful. So, for any of the leaders out there that are struggling on, like Dan said it perfectly, having a hard time stepping into other people's shoes, take the opportunity, take the time to do it, like really, really go through it and see what it feels like, and then, start breaking it down into a more sizable equation for them. So,
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, Roberta, any final words from you before we wrap up here?
I think that we get so stuck in the person that we are, and what drives us and what gives us energy, that it is really hard to imagine that someone could be just the opposite. And so sometimes it takes, having a conversation with someone who's very different from you, and really understanding their perspective. Because I don't know how many books you've read about introversion and things like that, but it's an extrovert's world, essentially. Everything that we do is geared toward the extrovert. Oh, well, not everything, but the vast majority, right? And so taking time to reflect on that, I think, is really important as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely will. I haven't really thought about it that way. So thanks again, Roberta. We really appreciate you coming on here and giving us your time, and so many good little nuggets in here. And thank you for those of you that are watching this. Remember, we do this show because we believe that everybody's leading somebody, and there's no one right way to do it. It's just about trying to get better every single day. And so we want to connect with more of you. If you're out there and this is resonating with you, reach out to us. We'd love to connect with you, get to know you more, possibly have you on the podcast, connect with you business-wise or just as friends. So if this is resonating, reach out. We'd love to talk with you. Roberta, thanks again for joining us. This was great.
You're welcome. Thanks for having
thank you,
me.
Roberta.
Yeah.
Leaders got to lead.
Leaders got to lead.
Yeah.
Leaders got to lead out.